that are not as lofty as those righteous souls from the world of Bria, and we will even get into souls that come from the world of Atzilus, right? Not today though. But souls that come from the world of Yetzirah. So, as the angels, right? They too have they serve God with an instinctual love and awe of God. They just, sometimes you see people just naturally like loving, naturally just good. Um, and this kind of soul, I don't know where that soul's coming from, but this kind of soul that we're talking about that has a natural instinctual, not from their intelligence that has brought them to this, but they reveal their divine soul within them, um, instinctually with a love and awe of God. So that soul comes or has its abode, it comes from and has its abode in the world of Yitzhira, the world of formation, the world of divine emotions. The divine emotion is what permeates that world. Yet, interesting, the Alter Rebbe now explains, and I'm not exactly certain why he's putting this here, but it gives us more of an understanding of how things work above. That soul on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, new moon, and I think it might be even holidays if I'm not mistaken, they are able to rise from the lower level of Gan Eden in the world of Yetzirah, the world of formation, into the world of Bria, and where they are able to be radiated from the higher level of Gan Eden, Garden of Eden and paradise there, similar to those souls that are of the righteous nature, that are in the world of Bria, that they have um, um, a love and awe of God that is intellectually produced, right, by their awareness, their um, grasp of the divine. Why are these souls being able to go there? Angels can't go there. Only souls can go there. Distinction now between angels. The soul is something that we've mentioned earlier that we can get the understand. Angels have no freedom of choice. So they are instinctually able to connect and perceive the divine, so much so that they're in awe, they're in love. But a soul that comes from the world of Yetzirah and is now in this world, right? So even though their soul is rooted and that soul is found in the domain of the world of Yetzirah, that's where its abode is, that's where its home is. But it has to choose that. We as humans have freedom of choice. We have to choose. Do I want to connect or be disconnected and do what's wrong? So since we have the choice, we could choose godliness or we could choose Sitra Acher, the other side, the negative forces of this world. And the fact that this soul chose the holy force rather than negative force, so therefore it gets, so to speak, an added reward that it is able to even climb to the world of Bria. So Andrew, you were asking how we can get to Bria. Well, if we're a world of soul from Yetzirah, so perhaps we can climb up from there, right? Now, so why on Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh is because on those times there's something called Aliyat HaOlamot or Aliyat HaOlamis. The worlds have an upgrade, ascend. What makes Shabbos a holy day? You know why? Because literally, the life force of the world that is through the 6 days is now elevated back to its source. Malchus goes into Zah, the level of Malchus, of sovereignty, the lowest level, which is the source of divine word of God, is now elevated into the divine emotions, and therefore everything is kind of pushed upwards to a next level higher. And therefore the souls that have their abode in the world of Yetzirah on Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh, are able to rise up. Batya, shortly, okay? I want to get through this. Thank you for your patience. Okay. Since there's a lot today, 2 days of learning here. Okay. Now, I want to bring out an idea over here in conclusion The Alter Rebbe sounds just speaking about souls and where they hang out, where they live, where their abode is, where they're, And we are, by the way, that's our soul here, now, but we're not sensitive to it, so we're not recognizing where its abode is, right? Because our soul, our divine soul, is in our body an animal soul that covers up over and then therefore hides its experience, right? When will we have that experience? When we leave this world, ultimately, in Gan Eden, we will be able to have that experience of the soul that will be in the world of Yetzirah, the world of Bria, and the like. Absolutely. Meaning, but there, we will have a ray of light of God in Gan Eden, whether it's the lower Gan Eden in Yetzirah or the higher Gan Eden in Bria. Our soul will have the pleasure of a divine light, but only a ray of light that will enthrall us to such a degree that it's worth to go through all of purgatory and to have all of that pain and suffering that the soul will experience in order to have the divine light that it will have in Gan Eden, because it's so pleasurable. We can't imagine all the pleasure in this world. 1 hour of it doesn't compare to all the pleasure. I mean, 1 hour there from all the pleasure we have in this world doesn't compare to 1 hour of pleasure there. That's how powerful it is. But we only get the ray of light. This world, though, you know what we get? We get the essence of God. But the essence of God is beyond something that we can experience. But that attachment we do have. And therefore, since we have the essence of God in this world, how do we have the essence of God? By the divine service. In the act of doing the mitzvah, what we create in our divine service, in other words, by doing the mitzvah with intent, we're allowing that our mitzvah will rise up, our divine service. The Torah we're studying right now, right, that's inspired by some kind of kavana, that will then be actually elevated to the divine elements of those worlds, not the created, the world itself, but to the divinity of that world. We're going to have much more on that. This is just the beginning of this thought. But what that means is that we do a mitzvah now. Our soul, there's two things. Our soul has a ray of light of divine pleasure. Right now we don't experience it. We'll experience it when our soul is untethered from a body and Gan Eden. Right now we have the essence of the divine that we're connected to and bringing into this world. But at the same time, you know what we're doing? When we're doing a mitzvah, like right now learning Torah, this divine service ascends and is absorbed into God Himself through the divine attributes above, to the holiness above, which those divine attributes are bound up in one with God, which means the act of my mitzvah is eternal. Our sins are not eternal. Our negative things are not eternal at all. They're temporary. But the mitzvah is bound up and one with the divine. What that means, we'll get to more about that, but that's the conclusion of today's class. So we've learned a lot of different ideas over here. If we have any questions, any comments, any thoughts, Batya? Oh.
Okay, Rabbi. This is just a quick question, and this is for anyone and everyone who's not very familiar with the world. If the different worlds, if you would at some point maybe have a deeper discussion about all of the different worlds so that there can be a greater understanding in this class. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Well, I hope that metaphor that I gave gives a little appreciation and understanding of the various worlds and how each world has its purpose, what it needs to ultimately accomplish. So if our soul comes from whatever world it comes from, as I said, the truck driver of the world of Asiya, the foot soldiers, right? Of we don't have such a refined heart and such refined minds. You know, just give you an example. Chassidim of the Alter Rebbe were able to meditate upon an idea for 2 to 5 hours without interruption, without their minds going. Maybe I don't know. Maybe their minds went. I have no idea how their mind. But they were able to focus in. For me, for 2 minutes, to focus in without any other thoughts coming into my mind, it's a very difficult thing. They could be for 2 hours, for 5 hours. They could be so focused, so engaged. Talking about minds that are beyond, right? So we are foot soldiers, which is great because we're going to get the job done of bringing the final redemption. Okay, let me bring up over here. Okay, excuse me one moment. Denise has a question. Yes, send them. Yeah, if I missed a question from someone on Facebook, please resend it because I look through. Sometimes I miss things. Andrew, so if we choose good over evil, do a mitzvah and tshuva, can we reach the higher level on Shabbos on new moon? We're not reaching it. I mean, maybe our soul's reaching it here, but we're not going to experience it here. So yes, we could reach it, but we're not experiencing it here. Okay. Again, if I missed a question, just copy it and resend it because I thought I saw all the questions. Oh, Diana asks, at sin, we fall into Asiya. How does the Noah affect the worlds? I'm not certain I got that question clear. At sin, we fall. No, we're not talking here about sin. We're talking about where our souls come from, where our souls live. That's what we're talking about. And where our souls will go to. That's what we're talking about here. We're not talking about what sin does. That's a different issue, a different question. Not that that's not an issue and not a question, right? But that's not the discussion here. The discussion here is we have a soul. It came from somewhere. It lives somewhere. It will go somewhere and live there. Right? So our soul, if it came, the righteous, right? Some righteous come from the world of Bria, that they are capable again of taking just their hand on their forehead and wiping it like that, and with a brief moment's thought about God, that affects them and changes them emotionally in a moment. We can't do that. We can't change our emotions for years sometimes. You know that person that you hate? You might still hate them. You know why? Because you couldn't change yourself emotionally. Because your intelligence wasn't able to influence your emotions. How come? Because you're probably not from the world of Bria. Right? That doesn't mean it's still not a challenge and we still have to work on it. But the divine soul that comes from there can just go like that. Wipe your forehead and voila. That's a very different kind of being, right? Oh, Rina, okay, I see your questions. I think sometimes the questions, I only see it the second time. I don't know why. Does this mean that angels are of the 4 different worlds in heaven? Yes, angels come from 4 different worlds also. Yes, absolutely, Rina. Sorry, I missed that earlier. Souls of Atzilus we'll get to. Okay. How does Noah's flood affect the world of Asiya? Well, when we speak about the world of Asiya, the world of action, there's a spiritual world, and then there's, of course, our physical world. So the physical world of Asiya, of course, it was affected by Noah's flood, as the atmospheric pressure changed and so many things changed. The people didn't live as long as a result, and so on and so forth. Right? Okay. Anybody on Clubhouse? Yaakov, Yael, Moishi, Hope, Jim, Avital. If you have something, please. Vilma, go ahead.
Yes, anybody's welcome to contribute. What I learned because I briefly touched on the four spiritual worlds before, but once I read and reread and you talk about it, it gets more clear. Some souls are of, the highest worlds, and each soul has its home in one of the four worlds. So the difference that I perceived as far as like human souls versus angel souls is that the angels are from a specific world. They cannot go higher or lower, but humans can. Is that correct?
Exactly. Perfect. Yes, humans can. So that, yeah. So even though we may have evolved or come from a specific world, we can ultimately evolve. It's not going to be as simple or as easy, and not necessarily that is our purpose. Our purpose is to fulfill the soul from where it came from. Hope, please share with us.
Hi, my question is, if you have an experience, a direct experience of one of the worlds, does that mean your soul came from that world?
So I'm not exactly certain what that means to have a direct experience. I'm not certain I mean, you know, unless we're refined enough and transparent enough to the divine, then for us to know which world it came from is going to be a huge challenge for us to know exactly. We might feel that it is something, and maybe it is, but I definitely couldn't tell you.
So I'll give a direct experience. I'll give a
Sure.
specific experience. So if you have an experience of the tool with a one of the matriarchs or patriarchs' soul,
Right.
that they are abiding in a certain world. So you must have traveled somehow to that world to experience Betul with their soul.
Ah, okay. So that's interesting what you mentioned. So there is that kind of concept. Actually, we recently touched upon it. That you can be, and that's called ibur nishama, impregnating soul, which means you can be attached. Another soul can attach itself to you, even not at even not at your request, so to speak, but another soul can attach itself of the righteous can attach itself to you to get to, so to speak, impregnate you, meaning to give you something more that you would not have had on your own level of a soul. And thank you, Hope, for bringing that up, because that now ties in with some of the questions that were asked previously, that because of that soul, so now you have an attachment, a relationship through that soul, even though you don't come from that place, but now you can reach that loftier place through them. Thank you, Hope. Yes, that is the concept. Is that?
Yeah, so I actually had a direct experience with Rakalenu.
Mm-hmm.
So now, using what you just spoke about, can you clarify the experience?
Oh, no, I wish I could. I can't. I'm not so. I'm not such a soul that has that capability. The only thing that I can tell you, and this is what I can tell you, how do we know that we have a connection to another soul? A loftier soul, of course, we're talking about. We don't want any. We're not talking about demonic souls over here. Even though there is that concept, there is that concept. But that's not at all our discussion here, and that's not what we want to know about. But how could we ascertain that we were connected to that loftier soul? Is it brought us to a loftier way to live, more divine. If it brought us to a bad place, then that means we didn't really have a true connection. But if it brought us to a loftier way to act and behave, then we can, we might be able to ascertain through that yes, I've been connected, and through that soul, it's brought me to a new place. And that means, an actual literal change in one's behavior, in one's, thought, speech, and action. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Amazing.
I actually have one other question, which
Sure.
is in a completely different direction.
Go ahead.
But what about the concept of lost souls? So basically, those who mostly have died in very tragic ways, very violent and/or tragic ways, often, so like during the Holocaust or maybe a suicide victim, and are have not settled, so their soul is kind of still lost in a, like, so you were saying, like, when we leave the body, we go to whatever world,
Right.
but they're not, they're still
Not necessarily. No,
wandering.
just because someone, you know, God forbid, had a violent death, um, the violent death could actually be part of the healing process of that soul, believe it or not. Could be actually, and I repeat that, to make sure that there's clarity. I'm not saying it is. So like someone who had a violent death, I'm not saying, point a finger and say, okay, I'm not, I don't have the right to say that. I don't know. I'm not, such a lofty soul that has that kind of divine awareness, but it's possible. Death in general is an atonement for the soul. Even the death punishment in Judaism, which is, so seldom was it ever used, but the concept of the death punishment in Judaism is atonement. Is atonement. It's not about, getting even. It's not about getting even. It's about atonement. So a death that is tragic is, first of all, the death itself is atonement, and the fact that it's in a tragic way can even be meaning a greater level of atonement, of cleansing, which atonement means the idea of cleansing. So thank you, Hope, for bringing that up. But it doesn't mean that that soul is not going to its abode, right? It is going to go through its process of cleansing further whatever needs to be cleansed in order that it will ultimately come to the lower level of Gan Eden or the higher level of Gan Eden, and have its abode there. Is that clear?
Yeah. I just know, in my experience, there are souls that somehow don't surrender to the process.
Yeah, I know, but death, as we say in Pirkei Avot, against your will you die. So it does, no one willingly won. I mean, maybe sometimes someone is so ready to go, but in the end, God's the one who takes us. Yeah, but thank you. Denise asks, aren't Holocaust victims Kedoshim? Absolutely, they're whole. Yeah, so Denise is actually mentioning another angle on that when we speak about Holocaust victims, right? They themselves are Kedoshim. They're holy, holy souls. So they probably, with all the suffering they went through in this world, they go straight to Gan Eden, straight to the Garden of Eden, and I'm sure even to the higher level. Yeah, thank you, Denise, for bringing that up. Um, yes, and finally, the last question over here, and we're gonna call it a day because it's my mother, Shalom, passed from cancer. She said she felt that she was being pushed from Hashem, punished from Hashem. Can you bring clarity to me regarding this? Well, first of all, I cannot, take you, Denise, or I or anybody else can't take responsibility what your mother says. Because she feels that doesn't mean it is that. We have to know that. Just because we feel something, that doesn't make it the truth. It might be how I'm feeling about it, fine. And with that, we need to, deal and address a person, but that doesn't mean that that's the reality. God is not punishing. Now, meaning punishing for the sake of punishment. God is cleansing. Cleansing can be punishing. When a child plays in the dirt and it's very dirty, and the mother puts the child into a hot, tub and start scrubbing to get the dirt out and combing their hair and it's full of dirt, it's painful. Is the mother doing it out of love or out of punishment? Total love. But it's painful. And it feels punishing, but it's not. I mean, it's punishing in the sense, right? But that's the consequence of what happens when you play in the dirt. So likewise in our lives, if we play in the dirt and we don't do tshuva, we don't fix it, then we get cleansed. That is God's love in order that he can ultimately give us that ray of light of him that will have the most divine pleasure that you could imagine that is beyond. So that's ultimately what it is. And with that, folks, I must end. There might be more questions, but we're going to have to continue tomorrow. This has been a great conversation and great learning, and I appreciate it. It's just I've got other things that I'm responsible for. So we're going to call it a day. Go ahead, Vilma.
Thank you for keeping it short and sweet.
This today wasn't short. It was sweet. I hope this was sweet, even though we're speaking about some heavy duty stuff. But today was. But thank you. Those on Clubhouse, please follow. That you can find out more. We're daily here, and on Facebook. Thank you, everybody. I hope it worked out today well for everybody on Facebook. That your questions we got to. Please comment to make sure that was great and it worked out. Thank you, Denise, for being on top of it, and everybody else. I'm Rabbi Ronnie Fine, coming to you for Chabad Zichron Kadesh in Montreal, Canada. It's a privilege and a pleasure to share with you the Tanya. Have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining. Thank you.